Peacemaker, Season 2, Episode 7. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. It is so crazy to think that Season 2 is one episode away from being done already, but that's where we're at, and we have so much to go over in this episode. This was probably one of, if not my favorite episodes from the entire season so far, so let's get right into it. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. Alright, Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 7. As I mentioned, this episode kicks off in a pretty crazy fashion. As we saw at the very end of the last episode, it was confirmed, which pretty much everyone was theorizing, especially by the end of Episode 5, that this universe is Earth X, or at least some version of Earth X, where the Axis powers did win World War II. So we pick up with Harcourt and Peacemaker in Argus going against the other Harcourt and a bunch of Argus agents. They do manage to get out of there. They escape. They get away on the Peace Cycle. And while all that's going on, you flash back to John Economos, and you have him being interrogated by Peacemaker's dad. And then Keith comes into the fold. He and Keith kind of interrogate John Economos a little bit. John Economos tries to backtrack what he said to pretty much no avail. They do know that his original proclamation that this Peacemaker isn't their Peacemaker was true, and this leads them to suit up and go after Peacemaker. And while all that's going on, we catch up with Adebayo, who, as we saw from the last episode, was being chased. For part of that, it was by Keith, but then eventually it just ends up being a bunch of random people from the neighborhood. They end up in a swimming pool. Adebayo starts to get out of there with the help of Judo Master, and then Judo Master decides to just fry everyone in the pool. Really brutal, crazy scene. Again, not really any gore was shown from that, but it's still buttloads of people in a swimming pool just getting absolutely fried. So again, I always say that this show, in comparison to Superman, is definitely a different tone. And that makes sense because James Gunn did say that each project, even though they are going to be connected in a way and have some type of connectivity, especially if it makes sense, they will each have their own individual tone so that you can see the director's own stamp on everything. And I think that's really cool. Because, again, going into things like, I don't remember if the Swamp Thing movie is still happening, but we do know the Clayface movie is still happening. They're actually in production of it right now. And that's going to be a rated R film. So just knowing how they've handled Peacemaker really lets me know that they are going to let Clayface and other films, other TV shows, really push the boundaries, whereas something like Superman is going to be more family-oriented, while it may still have a few dark things underlying. That being said, we then flash back to Vigilante and Vigilante. They're talking a little bit about the differences between their world. The other world Vigilante is shocked that America won World War II, and the other Vigilante is like, yeah, and I'm 99% sure that we didn't team up with the Axis powers. Again, not going to say that word on YouTube. Don't want this video to be taken down. You all know who I'm talking about. But then they do kind of confirm that one of our Adrian's friends is going to be in danger because she is a person of color. And their little banter about this was just really funny. And the fact that, again, every scene with Vigilante I absolutely love because of just how he delivers things. And he even says, like, oh, I kind of came with someone who is of color. And the other Vigilante was like, well, wait, like, you can't tell? And he's like, oh, no, I could tell. It's the very first thing I noticed about her. So again, it's just those little comments from him that are just so funny. He has almost no social awareness, and I absolutely love it. Then we go back, we see Keith and Peacemaker's dad confronting Peacemaker, but they actually end up saving Harcourt and Peacemaker from all those cops. I think it's confirmed later that it was about 15 officers that were chasing after them, and they were all killed by Keith and Peacemaker's dad. So then they do escape. They go back to Peacemaker's family home, and they all start to talk. And this is where something really, really interesting happens. And that interesting thing is that we start to see one of the other really big differences in this universe compared to ours. And Keith is incredibly pissed. He hears this explanation from Peacemaker about killing his brother, and even though it's in an accidental way, he doesn't care. All he wants is revenge. But then the voice of reason, the person who is listening and who is just trying to hear our Peacemaker out, is Peacemaker's dad. And that's just so interesting because as we knew him, he was a racist. He was someone who thought himself above other people. And he's someone who, what he thought was the exact way something happened. And he didn't give it a second thought that he could ever be wrong. That was so different in comparison to the other White Dragon, the other version of Peacemaker's dad, to the point where he even says, I believe the kid's story. I believe he didn't mean to kill your brother when talking to Keith. I believe it was an accident. And he even says that to Peacemaker. He says, so it was an accident. And Keith is not having that. Keith is pissed. And this is where we get that little interaction between Harcourt and Peacemaker's dad about White Dragon being a blank, again, member of the Axis powers, wink wink. And that's where we find out that this version of Peacemaker's dad is actually somewhat of a good guy. He stops the bad guys, but he can't change the whole world. And he says he's a man of God. And when the time comes for him to be judged, he believes he'll be judged as a good person because he always tries to do the right thing and tries to stop the bad people. And he denies being a member of the Axis powers. Again, not going to say that word. While all this is going on, we do have Adebayo and Judo Master outside hiding in the trees, and that's where they are confronted by Vigilante, and Vigilante, you have that funny little interaction where both Vigilantes are clearly disliking Judo Master, and again, our Vigilante is talking to Adebayo and says, oh, hey, can you guess which one is me? And it's like, yeah, obviously it's you. You're the one who just asked that. Again, just that banter between the two Vigilantes, that's what I think a lot of us were missing in this season, and that's been shining in the past 2 episodes. Vigilante is one of, if not the best character in this whole show, and the fact that we're now getting more of him is really, really awesome. So then they decide, hey, instead of killing all those people to get inside, we're just going to sneak around the back. And as they're sneaking around the back, we see Peacemaker talking to his dad and talking to Harcourt, and they're having that conversation about him being a man of God, about him being a good person. And that's when Vigilante crashes through the window and he takes down Peacemaker's dad. Again, from his point of view, they were both in super suits, Keith and Peacemaker's dad. He was in the White Dragon suit, which Vigilante saw him use before to try to kill Chris. John Economos was tied up to a chair, so he went in, he attacked him, and he killed him. And that's something that then Keith obviously sees that. Keith is in disbelief. And as that happens, police break in, so we get a fight that breaks out between the 2 Vigilantes, all of the police, Keith holding his dad in his arms, and he does, unfortunately, die. And again, this is something that Peacemaker once again has to see happen. He obviously saw the death of his own father, but now he's seeing the death of a different father. And as this is happening, he keeps saying he wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't a blank, because he wasn't. And that's one thing he's realizing, that he was a good person in this universe. And so they all go off, they start to escape, but then Keith comes in, takes down Peacemaker, starts hitting him over and over again. I don't know if Peacemaker was just caught off guard, if he was really unable to fight back. In my opinion, I think he chose to not fight back because that was his brother, so he couldn't, especially after what just happened with his dad, he couldn't bring himself to harm his brother, not in this universe. So that's when we do get Eagly attacking Keith, getting him off Peacemaker, and then we see Harcourt, Vigilante, Adebayo attack Keith. Vigilante stabs Keith, and we see Peacemaker freak out and saying, no, 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 stop, stop, stop. Get away from him, because that's still his brother. And you can see the pain in his face. You can hear it in his voice. And they decide to get out of there, but Harcourt and Vigilante stay behind. Now, it's very important to note, this is Vigilante from Earth X who did stay behind. I did see a couple of people saying, oh, which Vigilante crossed over? It's nothing like that. And I'll get into that a little bit later, how they make it very obvious. Obviously, you could tell by the different holsters. One had only one pistol at the time, one had both. Again, I'll get into that a little later. But Harcourt does stay behind, and she asks for one of his guns as he's holding off the police, and she offs Keith. Or so we think. And she does this because she says, I can't have you coming after him. So this shows a lot of care and compassion, and in my opinion, love that she does have for our Chris, and I think that's going to be explored, especially in the next episode with how this one ended. And again, the fact that now she's killed someone that's really close to Peacemaker, I think will help her get over what happened with Rick Flag even more so. Speaking of Rick Flag, while a lot of this stuff is going on, Rick Flag Sr. does get someone out of prison. It's the person who helped out Lex Luthor in the Superman movie. Does manage to track down the interdimensional gateway, the door, notes that it's different than the one they used because this one is stable. So then at that time, they decide to all pull up on Adrian's house so that when the 11th Street kids do arrive back in the main universe, they have tons of Argus agents waiting outside. And then as that happens, the episode ends on Peacemaker giving that device over to Argus and telling them that, hey, I was the one who did this. They came in to get me and to convince me to hand this over. And we see a lot of them kind of questioning that and saying, hey, why are you doing this? This isn't, but he wants to pay for his crimes. He views himself as a true villain and someone who brings nothing but death and despair. And this is where I wanted to get into how we definitely know this is our Vigilante. As he's being arrested, Vigilante goes to go for one of his guns. He's going to stop it. The other Vigilante would not have done that because he and Peacemaker were mortal enemies. He would not have tried to save our Peacemaker, especially not in that moment, not to kill all those innocent people. Again, he's not a fan of police officers, how they are in his world, so you could say that he wouldn't have had an issue, but he wouldn't have risked that for Peacemaker because he didn't create any sort of a bond with him by that time. Adebayo does manage to stop Vigilante from taking out all those cops to save Peacemaker, all the Argus agents, so they do end up arresting Peacemaker. He does get taken away. Then the episode leads off, or ends off, with something really, really interesting. And that's Keith getting taken away on a stretcher. Why would they do that if he's dead? So he is clearly alive even after what Harcourt did to him. So does this mean he has some type of meta ability? Or does this mean they have some type of way to bring him back in some capacity? Whether it's as some type of a cyborg character or injecting him with some sort of serum, I don't know. But I do think that he is going to potentially be one of the big bads either in episode 8 or in another project going forward. Because again, they would not have deliberately left him alive after all of that if it wasn't for a purpose. So, that being said, we do get a little bit of a teaser for next week. I have some theories how that can lead to Superman Man of Tomorrow, and how one of the doorways that they do end up opening up is something where it could lead us to a universe with the War World, or it could lead us to something with Brainiac. I do think Brainiac is probably the most likely villain for the Man of Tomorrow movie. Again, my second option would be some type of crime syndicate scenario, but I'm not totally sure yet. Those would be my top two if I really had to put my money on it. But what do all of you think? What do you think of the episode? Do you think these last two episodes have been some of the best in the entire series? Have you enjoyed more Vigilante? And what do you think is going to happen in the finale? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.